This is Caesar de Bello Gallico IV, chapter 27. When we last left the Romans, they were having a spot of bother disembarking onto the British shore, but once they got onto dry land, they launched an assault upon the Brits, and then they won. That's all there was. They won. That was it. And we begin this chapter with hostes proelio superati. Simul atque se ex fuga receperunt, statim ad Caesarem legatos depace miserunt. So the hostes, the enemy, that would be the Britanni, the Brits. Proelio, ablative singular neuter of means. Superati, perfect passive participle of supero, superare. It is nominative plural masculine, agreeing with the nominative plural masculine subject, hostes. So the enemy, comma. Having been overcome, conquered, defeated, proelio. The Romans would say by means of battle. We in English tend to say in battle, having been conquered in battle. Simul atque. Simul plus atque or ac or pariter or aeque means as soon as. So it's a temporal conjunction. As soon as se receperunt, the reflexive, accusative, plural, masculine direct object, goes with the verb receperunt. So they recipio, they recaptured themselves, which is somewhat idiomatic for they recovered. So they recovered ex fuga, and that explains the ablative of separation, ex plus the ablative fuga, there should be a macron over the a, from flight. So as soon as they recovered from flight, after they were superati proelio, conquered in battle, statim, immediately, stat, ad Caesarem legatos depace miserunt. At this point, this and its variants should be somewhat like a Homeric formula. We've seen this so many times. They sent legates to Caesar concerning peace, and they did so statim, immediately. Immediately they sent envoys, ambassadors, legates to Caesar depace concerning peace. Please, oh please, stop winning against us, O Caesar. Obsides, sese, daturos, quaeque, imperasset, facturos, polliciti sunt. All of this hinges upon the final verb there, polliciti sunt, which is of course deponent. Until we get there, we have the obsides, which could be the nominative or accusative plural masculine, sese, the emphatic se. That's probably going to be a subject, and I would guess an indirect statement because our next word is daturos, and you don't need the essay to know that's probably going to act as a future active infinitive. I would imagine that we are deep into an indirect statement here. Obsides being, I would imagine, the direct object, with sese being the subject accusative of this indirect statement, the verb being daturos. That's just the way these things work, and you figured this out just by experience and reading a lot. Quaeque imperasset. Quaeque, que being the enclitic form of et, and it's linked to the que, and quae, which things imperasset, that is a syncopated or truncated form for imperavisset, third person singular, pluperfect active subjunctive of impero, imperare, imperavi, imperatus. And what things he, meaning Caesar, had ordered, had commanded. This is further proof that we are in an indirect statement because we have a relative clause, quae imperasset, and that relative clause being a subordinate clause, if we were inside an indirect statement, then that verb would be in the subjunctive. And indeed, imperasset, lo and behold, it is a subjunctive. Facturos, and once again, like daturos, we do not need the helping verb esse to tell us this is an infinitive. I would imagine that daturos is going to be the verb that going with the direct object obsides, and quae is going to be the direct object of facturos, or quae will contain the direct object of facturos. And the main verb is there, polliciti sunt. The subject once again being the hostes at the very beginning of the sentence. So the hostes polliciti sunt, from pollicior, pollicere, pollicitus sum, meaning to promise. In Latin, when you promise something, it typically takes an indirect statement. So a phrase like, I promise to do my homework has to be phrased, I promise that I will do my homework. So usually we will be followed up with a future infinitive because it's a subsequent action to whatever you're promising. You're promising that you're going to do something in the future. So they promised, I know it looks passive, translated actively because it's deponent. They promised, perfect, that, indirect statement. Sese, they, themselves, meaning the Brits, the same subject of the promised verb, the head verb. They said that they, daturos, would give obsides, hostages, and facturos, they would do quae, the accusative plural neuter, things which, notice the lack of an ea there, it's kind of contained in the quae, the things which imperasset, he, Caesar, had commanded, had ordered them. Una cum his legatis, Commius Atrebas venit, quem supra demonstraveram a Caesare in Britanniam praemissum. So good to see you again, Commius. Una, macron over the a. That's the adverb form of unusa So it means as one or together, as onely. Together, cum his. You may be thinking that this is going to be, at this point, cum conjunction, because we've seen it so many times, when, since, although, but be careful, it is followed up by some ablatives. So it could be the preposition. With his legatis, with these envoys, now that makes sense, so that's a point in the preposition's favor. Commius Atrebas venit. Commius, the Atrebaten, you may remember him from before, he was sent beforehand, praemissum. He venit, Commius the Atrebaten came together with these lieutenants, with these envoys and ambassadors, the one spoken of before who had gone to Caesar to discuss terms of peace. So Commius came together with them, and I would imagine that is cum preposition with followed by the ablative of accompaniment. Quem supra demonstraveram. Quem is a relative clause, so a relative pronoun introducing a relative clause, the antecedent being Commius Atrebas. It is accusative, it is singular, it is masculine, it is the direct object in its clause, quem supra demonstraveram. In English we would say whom, we even put an M, quem, in English. Whom supra, above, abovely, in the above. Remember, this probably would have been on a scroll or some work like that, so he's talking about we say this today in English, above or below when you're doing a reading. Look above or look below on the page. Demonstraveram. I, first person singular. And we don't see that too often, but it does show up. Remember, there is a difference between Caesar, the scribe, the scriptor, the author, the writer of the commentaries, and Caesar, the general, the imperator, the character in the commentaries. They're not always the same person. Caesar's third-person objectivity sometimes extends that far, where the narrator, the first-person singular, I am the one telling this story, these commentaries, writing these memoirs, he claims to not know what's going on in character Caesar's head. So keep that in mind. The first-person singular is not terribly rare. It doesn't show up too much, though. Sometimes the first-person plural shows up, too. So, whom I had mentioned above. We can translate demonstro as mentioned here. Whom I had talked about above. A plus the ablative Caesare, it's either separation or personal agent, and here it's going to be personal agent because of the passive praemissum. In plus the accusative, motion towards Britanniam, into Britain, not just, we're not located in Britain, we went into Britain, and then praemissum, so a verb of motion, to prae, beforehand, mitto, send. So he was sent beforehand. So together, Commius the Atrebaten came with these lieutenants. Commius, whom we had mentioned above, had been praemissum, sent forth beforehand into Britain by Caesar. Caesare. Hunc illi e navi egressum, cum ad eos oratoris modo Caesares mandata deferet, comprehenderant atque in vincula conjuncerant. Tum proelio facto receperunt, et impotenda pace eos rei cupam in multitudinem contulerunt, et propter imprudentiam ut ignoscaretur petiverunt. Yikes. All right, this is a really cool thing about Latin and other synthetic languages that just the analytic languages like English cannot do. So we start off with Hunc, and then we have illi. And because those words are somewhat opposed, they're on equal footing. Hunc meaning from hic haec hoc, that is right here. Hic haec hoc is here, close by. It's this guy. It's the closer one. So we're talking about Commius Atrebas. That is accusative, singular, masculine. So this is a word, a pronoun, referring to the noun Commius. We're linking to the previous sentence. Remember that the Romans in Caesar's day, they lacked punctuation the way that we have, and they didn't put spaces between words because writing space was rare, and you had to preserve it. So they didn't fritter away or waste space. So we don't have a lot of ways to link sentences the way that we do them. We typically put a period and then start a next sentence. They have to find a way to keep the thread so that the reader does not lose the narrative. So we're linking this sentence, Hunc illi navi, etc., with the previous one. So we're drawing us back to Commius Atrebas, this guy, but he's the direct object. He's in the accusative, which means that something's going to happen to him. Well, what happened to him? Illi. Now we've named the subject. Illi, as opposed to Hunc. Illi are the further away guys, the other guys in the story. We've got two people in the story. We've got Commius and we've got the Britanni. And they are nominative plural masculine. Illi, it stands in, because it's a pronoun, for the noun Britanni, or the adjective substantive, the Britanni. Hunc illi. So this guy, something happened to this guy, Commius, and the ones who did it were illi, those guys, the Brits. So they, the Brits. E navi egressum. You take that phrase together, and it further describes Commius. It also describes temporally when this action occurred. So when this guy Commius, when he was egressum, stepping e navem, off his ship, when he was disembarking, illi, those guys, the Brits, they did something. Cum ad eos oratoris modo Caesares mandata deferre, and that is further defining the time. When did he step off his ship? Well, when he deferret was, notice the imperfect, so it's going to be a contemporaneous action with whatever our main verb is, and our main verb should be a past tense. He was deferro, de plus ferro, it's another bear carry word. So he was bearing the mandata, the commands, Caesares, of Caesar, ad eos, to them, oratoris modo, as if he were a spokesperson, in the manner of a spokesperson or a messenger. He's given this oration, this speech, these terms, these mandata, to the Brits on behalf of Caesar. So when this guy, Hunc, Commius, disembarked bearing the commands of Caesar as his spokesperson, illi, those guys, the Brits, the others, they comprehenderant, they had seized him. They laid hands on him. I know we have comprehend in English, and that means to understand something. That's to mentally grasp or seize something. In Latin, comprehendo means to physically arrest, to lay hands upon. They had laid hands upon him, grabbed him, seized him. Atque, and also in vincula conjecerunt. They had, and we've seen this before, thrown him in chains, vincula, bindings, fetters. Only before, I believe it was book 1, chapter 47, that was Gaius Valerius Procellus. Poor guy, he was in catenas proellicit. That was Ariovistus threw him in cats, in catenas. These are vincula, chains, binds, fetters, pretty much the same word, or they're synonyms. A nice English translation of that whole first part would be something like, the Brits had seized Commius the Atrebatan, this guy, when he stepped off his ship to give the commands of Caesar as his spokesperson, and they threw him in, and they had thrown him into chains. Tum proelio facto miserunt. Tum, thereupon, then, at that time, proelio facto, and this is further defining temporally when these actions occurred. So proelio facto, ablative absolute, when the battle happened, after the battle was done. So thereupon, when the battle was done, remiserunt, they sent him back, with the direct object still being Hunc at the beginning. Remember, Caesar would not have put that semicolon after quaeque. So you have to keep going. The link between this part of the sentence and the last part is the tum. Thereupon, then. And then, next, they sent him back after the battle happened. And, in patenda pace eos re culpam in multitudinem contulerunt. That means something like they contulerunt. They bore the culpam, the blame. Think about it, mass. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, the blame, the fault. They bore the blame of the matter, of eos re, of the matter in multitudinem, upon the multitude, upon the masses. So, in patenda pace, in seeking peace. So, and in seeking peace, and when they came to discuss terms of peace, they bore the brunt of the blame, eos re, for the thing, of the matter. And of the matter, he's talking about the battle. The misunderstanding that occurred between your soldiers and our soldiers when you were attempting to invade our shores. Eos re, that matter. Yes, the Brits contulerunt culpam. They bore the blame. They put the fault in multitudinem, on the multitude. I'm sorry, it was just our stupid unwashed masses that made us do this dumb thing. I don't know how we could listen to the poor people and the multitude, the mob. I don't know how we could do that. So sorry. Please don't blame us. And propter imprudentiam, and ob or propter have the same meaning plus the accusative on account of imprudence. So in, meaning un, and prudens prudentis, prudentia, prudence, which is foresight, provideo, to look forward, to foresee. They didn't have any prudence. They lacked foresight. And on account of their lack of foresight, or you could even say wisdom, ut ignosceretur petiverunt. They petiverunt, they asked, they sought, and then that's going to take an indirect command of what they asked or they sought. So it's going to take a noun clause, and that's going to be ut ignosceretur. They sought that they be forgiven, that they be excused. And they be excused propter imprudentiam, on account of their lack of foresight, their lack of wisdom. So these verbs after the tum are remiserunt, et contulerunt, et petiverunt. They sent Commius back, they put the brunt of the blame upon the mob, and they asked, or they begged of Caesar that they be forgiven on account of their impudence or imprudence, their lack of foresight, lack of wisdom. So, what did Caesar then do? Caesar questus quod, cum ultro in continentem legatis missis pacem ab se petissent, bellum sine causa intulissent, ignoscere se imprudentiae dixit, obsidesque imperavit. So Caesar questus, questus means he complained. So it's questus sum. Should be an implied s there. So Caesar complained, or you could say Caesar having complained, because more correctly it's a perfect passive participle. Caesar having complained because, and this is what he complained about. Cum, although. When, since, although, this is going to be cum plus the subjunctive, so this is either going to be temporal, causal, or concessive. And once again, plug and chug, when, since, although. I've already read this, and I know that the answer is although. So we could give all three a try. So when they had asked for peace by themselves, when they had sent legates into the continent. And that would work on a first run through, but when you go on to read later, you're going to backtrack and have to re-examine that cum. It's a concessive. Caesar complained because although cum goes with petissent, which is a syncopated truncated form of petiviscent, they pluperfect subjunctive, they had ultro, that means on their own accord, asked for pacem, petissent pacem, asked for pacem, ab se, from him. Remember, the reflexive refers back to Caesar, who's the subject of the overall subject of the sentence. They had asked for peace, from him, from Caesar, ultra of their own accord, when they, with legatis mises, with legates having been sent in continentum, into the continent. So Caesar's saying, even though, although they of their own accord had sent ambassadors to him on the continent, asking him for peace, bellum sine causa intulicent, then that answers the quote, they had inflicted war, or they had declared war, sine causa, without cause, without reason, for no reason. And even though that they had done that, and this is what his questus is, his complaint, this is what he's complaining about, ignoscere se imprudentiae dixit. Oh, he's so gracious. What a swell stand-up guy that Caesar is. He dixit, he said, and that is our main verb here. He said that indirect statement, the subject is going to be se, refers back to Caesar, that he himself, ignoscere, was forgiving them. He forgave them. The ignoscere is a present active infinitive, so it's a contemporaneous action with the dixit, which is a past tense verb. Perfect tense. He said that he forgave them, imprudentiae, for their imprudence, their lack of foresight. It's the same thing that they said, on account of our lack of foresight and our lack of wisdom, please forgive us. And he said that, yes, I forgive you on account of this. Ignosco takes the dative, and that's what he's actually forgiving. Dixit said that, say, he, ignoscere, was forgiving their imprudentiae, their lack of foresight. You were very silly. You didn't think this through. We know, Caesar. We're very sorry. All right, as long as you're sorry. So Caesar complained that even though they had sent legates to him onto the continent of their own accord, asking him for peace, they had declared war without cause. And even though that had all happened, he complained about that. He said that he forgave them their lack of foresight, obsidesque imperavit, and he ordered hostages. Yes, yes, all is forgiven between us. Now, please hand over your loved ones. I will keep them safe, as long as you do what I tell you. Quorum keeps going. There's a semicolon. Quorum, and this is our way of linking this part of the sentence to the last part of the sentence, because we have a relative here, and the relative has to link back to something before, an antecedent. So I would imagine of these, quorum, genitive plural masculine, the antecedent being the obsides. Of these, meaning of the hostages, so out of the hostages, and that smells an awful lot like a partitive genitive. Illi, once again, this is a lot like what we had earlier, that we got so excited about that, guys, Latin can do this, but English cannot. Hunc illi, right up there, where we had Hunc linking us back to Commius Atrebas, and then we want to talk about the Britanni, who were then the subject. Here we have quorum linking us back to the obsides from beforehand, and then we have the illi, the Brits, who are actually the subject. So out of these, partem, and there's the accusative direct object of the upcoming verb. So quorum illi partem statim daturos, partem ex longinquioribus locis arcessitam, paucis diebus sese daturos dixerunt. So partem, part of these, meaning part of the hostages, and notice I'm not saying part of which. I guess I could say part of which, but English tends to prefer the demonstrative, where Latin prefers the relative here. So part of these, the hostages, the Brits, the illi, they dederunt, handed over, they gave statim immediately. But partem, and I know there's no sed or verum or partem vero or anything, but and it's pretty asyntotonic, but you should probably put a conjunction there in English. Really, this partem, like the alias, it screams out as sort of Latin's way to answer to the Greek homen hodē, which is Greek's way of saying, on the one hand there was this, on the other hand there was this. There was one group of people that did this, and another group of people that did this. One part did this, one part did this. And Latin has a lot of Greek envy, and this is probably Latin's way of answering that. It shows the Hellenistic influence on Latin literature at the time. Caesar, of course, would have been very knowledgeable about Hellenistic authorships and literature. So the Brits, immediately handed over part of these hostages, but part ex longinquioribus, great word, locis arcessitam paucis diebus sese daturos dixerum. But they said that, which Dico usually screams out for an indirect statement, that sese daturos, they themselves, the Brits, would give paucis diebus within a few days, ablative of time within which. And the direct object of the daturos, that future active infinitive without the esse, is partem. So the first partem, the illi partem statim dedere, was the direct object of dedere. This one is the direct object of daturos. It's the same verb, it's just a different form. Dixerunt is coordinate with dederunt. They are parallel as third person plural perfects. So part ex longinquioribus, from farther off locis places, farther off locales and places. There are some of these hostages that are just so far away, and it's going to take some time for us to gather our loved ones together. And that's what the arcessitam there, summoned, gathered. And it agrees with partem, so it's accusative, singular, and feminine. So part of the quorum, arcessitam, summoned or being gathered, it has to say summoned from the further off districts or locales. Dixerunt, the Brits said that they would hand them over paucis diebus within a few days. So the Brits handed over part of these immediately and said that they would hand over the other part within a few days, since they had been summoned from the further off districts. Interea suos in agros remigrare iusserunt, principesque undique convenire, et se civitatesque suas Caesare commendare quaeperunt. So interea, meanwhile, in the meantimely, it's an adverb. Meanwhile, suos, accusative, plural, masculine, direct object, in agros, in plus the accusative, motion towards, into the fields, remigrare and iusserunt. Alright, so iusserunt, they ordered suos. I was wrong to say it was a direct object. I should have waited. It was actually a subject accusative of the objective infinitive remigrare. So they ordered suos, their own, meaning their own people. They ordered their own folks, their friends, their bros, their own. They ordered their people remigrare, to return. You can see sort of remigrate, to return in agros to the fields. Get back to the fields, you lot. This is also the same multitudo which they blamed for having a lack of foresight. Back to the fields, you. Principesque undique convenire, and there's another infinitive. I would imagine it hinges upon something coming up. Et se civitatesque suas Caesare commendare, another infinitive, and yep, there we go, quaeperunt. So quaeperunt, another main verb that is parallel, it's same level with iusserunt. So they ordered their own to go back to the fields, and the principes, the chieftains, began convenire, to, and quaeperunt, begin to, screams out for a complementary infinitive, began to convenire, gather, undique, all gates, from all sides, from everywhere, et, and to commendare, to commend, to entrust, or hand over, se civitatesque, themselves, and civitates suas, their own states, Caesare, to the dative indirect object, Caesar. So the chieftains show up from everywhere, and they begin to surrender themselves and their states to Caesar.